Hey there, this is Red Falcon. This is the third match of the Summer 2022 Wargame Red Dragon Microdeck Tournament Series. With me today is my co-host Trout, and we have our teams. The FRA, known as the Fish Republican Army, and on Team Blue, we have Mod Squad on Team Red. So Trout, you got any words before we get into it?
I'm excited to watch the match. This is the match that I participated in, and we'll see how it goes. I gotta say, for the Fish Republican Army, this may be the Ocean Rising instead of the Easter Rising, but it is a important moment in the history of that organization. So, looking forward to seeing what goes on and assessing the plays, and looking back and seeing how they went.
For sure, for sure. And so we kind of see here we've got some guy over here with the K929 TB with the command infantry. It looks like he's been making kind of like a rush for Foxtrot. Um, but we'll see where things go. He could be making an ambitious rush for Echo, but at least his positioning on the left side of the highway seems to indicate that he's going to be heading that way. But Jade's going to be putting out some Gornostrelkis, which I assume are Gornostrelki 90. Let's see. Unfortunately, I cannot quite see, but I cannot imagine taking regular Gornos. As for Tuna, looks like he's going to be moving himself towards Charlie. And looks like we have a bit of interesting cross overlap here. You've put down a defense marker just behind Bravo, while Jade has put down a marker for helicopters to land behind Bravo. That is going to be an interesting clash of tactics. Certainly, those Mi-24Ds can be a menace.
We'll have to see how it starts off here. I know for my initial strategy in this game was I was worried about a wide flank on the west side of the map,
Hmm.
and see, I'm looking at backwards, east side of the map actually. So over on the side of the map without the points.
Hmm.
And so I was sending out some light infantry to get set up on that side, and then sending out just a bit of recon and a few light infantry throughout the map to kind of start the match.
Certainly, and controlling all that territory can certainly cause a lot of issues if either side is able to claim a lot of it.
I will say, looking at Jade's initial placement of the two beacons for the Gornos, right on those little four towns, that's a really smart placement in terms of it's a highly defensible location and fairly aggressive forward location, but off the main points, so you're not as likely to get contested there. And that's a strong opening kind of plan to land Gornos that far forward.
Oh, for sure, and because he's using.
Risk and
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, that's all.
Oh, sure, sure. Well, I was gonna say because he's using Goroshoki 90, that 26 AP power is enlightening or devastating. Devastating, yes, very devastating. Um, it can one slap a couple vehicles pretty easily. I mean, 16 frontal armor is I mean, sorry, 16 armor penetration power easily can one shot two frontal armor, but 26 is spicy. Can deal. I think you could one shot tanks with maybe 10 frontal with that kind of power, or thereabouts, very close in that range. Somewhere between 8 and 10.
I will mention it's interesting to see on the mod squad they've actually pulled all Soviet decks. So we have a Soviet armor deck, we have a Soviet airborne deck, and I believe a Soviet motorized deck. So very focused on those assets, very focused on that nation, and some very strong assets in that Soviet deck. So it'll be interesting to see how those go.
Most indeed.
And
I thought it was interesting decision to pull the T80B. The T80 series is typically not that renowned for its autonomy, requiring a lot of fuel to be refueled. But on a map like this, it might be doable. As long as there's like no ambitious maneuvers to go along the side. But we'll see. All right, well, let's get into it. All right. Uh,
on your account.
all right. Then five, four, three, two, one, play.
Right, on the Fish Republican Army side, I know for this match I have pulled a Eastern Bloc deck, so I pulled it for those Salamanders. I believe Navy has pulled a Polish armor deck,
Mhm.
and I think Penguin has pulled a Entente deck with check and you go, I do believe.
And it looks like I'm seeing stroke 2s and some SPW 80s. So it seems like you pulled a motorized deck for this fight, eh?
I did pull motorized, that is correct, yes.
All right. Oh. All right, so we're seeing some aggressive placement with HT40s from Penquill. Meanwhile, it looks like Jade's going hard in for the rush. Just MI-24Ds are coming in. A lot of going to Strelky 90 because I'm not seeing any high veterancy units here. Nothing to indicate that Spetsnaz.
That's a really nice aggressive rush, not countered, fast enough that the assets aren't there yet, and definitely able to take a really strong position Echo Delta.
Indeed. If those Gorno Strelky are able to get reinforced with more than just their own squads in the MI-24s, that could be a problem. Let's take a look over at what Navy Tune is doing over here. We see some T80. We see a T80U, two T80As, and a couple platoons of BMP-2 with OBR 1986, indicating that they have a 23 AP missile with two Tunguska Ms. Heavy investment for Tunguska Ms, 100 points each at 4 per card. That can be a hefty investment. We'll see if it pays off.
Something I do want to point out is some guy has done an excellent job moving up to Foxtrot and capturing that point for early reinforcement lane, and it's been taken care of in a very coordinated, very effective manner by Jade. So it's already, good reinforcements being pulled through there, and it's becoming the main infantry and sort of mechanized pull point for this fight for the mod squad, and that's a strong point actually for them to take right off the bat and start using right off the
Most
bat.
indeed. We just had an exchange with with the MiG-29, and looks like you maimed the Jade's Mi-24D pretty well. And it looks like he's backing off his helicopters at this point. He's not very happy about having to deal with planes. We're also seeing Jade starting to pull in some Shilkas. Now, these are the cheap radar variant of the 35 pointers. Typically, they are decent if the enemy doesn't spot them. But if the enemy does spot them, most anti-tank missiles like your DHS Mi-24P or Salamandra should be fully capable of outranging it as long as they're spotted proper. Right away, we're seeing some first blood from you. You just use a Salamander to now call it a T-80B.
I will point out that over on Gulf right now, we do have a light tank exchange going on with an Su-27M coming in. So this could be a fairly expensive shot if this Su-27M actually lands that, because we don't
Ooh,
have,
and that hurts.
yeah,
That was a identifying. That looks like a T-80U. That ooh, and it was a side shot, completely exposed. 27M
very
is
good.
coming in again. BMP-2 looks like it was destroyed.
I will say there's this Tunguska M there, and it probably was within range, but the radar is off. So that's a point where those radar units are very strong, so long as there's radar, and if there's not, you definitely give something up.
Indeed. Unfortunately, and even then, the Su-27M it's way up in the air and it's got respectable range. If the Tunguska M isn't hugging the T-80U, it's gonna be an easy getaway for the Su-27. The anti-plane range on the Tunguska is respectable for a Speg, still not that great against compared to heavy anti-air.
We've got an attack going on in Gulf here. Looks like light infantry, no artillery, a little bit of light anti-tank from helicopters, but generally not a lot of assets on the part of the British Republican Army.
And there goes a Yak-141 as well.
One just got down there. Was that a Tunguska kill? Or?
Yep, that was a Tunguska kill. The radar is turned on for the moment to help nab it down. We're seeing BMD-1Ds trying to struggle against these T-80Us. Not having a very good time. PT-85 is trying to engage with its Malyuka, getting very heavily punished for it, as the T-80As just slam it and send it straight to hell. We're seeing some of Penquill's proletariat work with Navy Tuner's Motor Strelky. This should help give a nice, respectable amount of firepower.
Yeah, I'm a little bit, the Mi-24Ds are really nice as a clutch unit when things don't go wrong and you need reinforcements. They can fly in and they can really change the course of a battle if the anti-air net is done properly. And there is a very solid chunk of Mi-24Ds there, just stacking up and waiting for that moment to push in and really make a difference on golf. So it's holding them back, it's waiting for that right moment, and then it'll be interesting to see how they use them for the mod squad.
Indeed. We're seeing just a massive buildup of these Mi-24Ds. We'll see if they're here to play or just for show. Meanwhile, looks like you are pushing up your FJB-40s. Those could be menacing for the Mi-24s. Oh, we see Tunguska's M finally trying to do their engagement. This is what they are built for. And that's a splash! That's why you don't double stack your helicopters, folks. That right there. And some guy looks very pissed about that decision to get completely slapped down from the sky like that. Su-27M coming in again. Looks like it just knocked out a T-80A. Yep, that's another 100-point snipe. Couple more of those, it'll make back its card value.
Yeah, that's really nice air control, really nice, just bringing that in when it's needed, hitting a target, getting out of there. And very good understanding of when it's safe to be in with radar and when it's good to run. So
Indeed. And the fact that it's taken out a T-80U, or at least one of them, has taken out a T-80U and a couple T-80As indicates that they are having massive success and very little punishment for utilizing them.
I will say at this point, the mod squad has done an excellent job capitalizing on their early push. They've got commands out to every spot. They've reinforced. They brought in air defenses. They brought in anti-tank defenses. They brought in more infantry to back up the areas and just kind of filled up Echo Delta very strongly with defensive lines. So it's a really nice defense in depth.
Indeed, and I'm not seeing a very strong mechanized or tank presence over here by Bravo. I think that could really indicate that there could be a sufficient mounting of an offense. That could be a problem. Meanwhile, looks like the fight in Gulf is ever on, and looks like you're making your way with the Salamandras to cover a lot of the open terrain here. And it seems some guy put out a K920 DB, even though it has poor optics. It is something to help spot, I guess, in that way.
Something to watch in this game, I just saw them wind up and they didn't actually fire, but they prepped for it, is we now have one, two, three, four Nonas on the field. And that's a really little solid little artillery unit. I think these are actually the tracked variant as well. No, these are the wheeled variant. No, they are the tracked variant. And so there is a large amount of pulls. There are 5 HE mortar. They've got good range. Ammo's not huge, but that's going to be a really nice little close support weapon.
Oh, for
And we'll
sure.
see how that plays out through the match.
Yeah, with a 7,700-meter range and 5 HE per round and a 7-round per minute fire rate, I believe you can do a lot of work with this. Maybe it is even a fire rate of 9. I think that is technically the correct. Yep, 9 it is. 9 rounds per minute. With enough volume of these little guys, you can definitely do some damage.
I will say it's not hitting yet. It's just kind of a general softening fire, but there are some gazebas. I can't say it properly, but Death of Wisconsin has pulled out some artillery units, and they're just doing just a general saturation bombardment over on Charlie, and we'll have to really see kind of what that does long term.
Yes, indeed.
Now it is in those areas that those Tunguskas, so if
Uh,
it scores a couple lucky shots,
I
that could
see
be a
them. It's the
pretty
Govazikos. Yeah, yeah. I'm probably butchering it too. Somebody in somewhere is yelling at me for pronouncing it like that, but we shall see.
well. I always welcome correction, so
Big same. Well, fortunately, it has not hit the Tunguska's M out there yet. However, the fact that they have a firm understanding of where your defensive position is, provided there's no tanks there, but your Tunguska M's are there, meaning that if those things get hit, it could prove fatal. Meanwhile, looks like we got you and Penquill out here trying to push across the open field, but BRDM3s that are hiding in the bushes just weren't having it. Well, and that's interesting. Looks like the BRDM3 just missed the memo and did not see the Tunguska M's move to the next tree line yet. Meanwhile, looks like we're back over by Echo. We're starting to see some artillery fire. Seems to be an understanding that Navy Tuna's tanks are over here. That the T-80As are engaging T-80Bs. However, Navy Tuna is missing the assets and gets completely sniped out.
That
Su-25T is
was
good, but it does require a bit of micro. You don't want to get too bold with your maneuvers. And Navy
really,
going hard in with a 27 PU. Even
yeah. This is a very critical moment
eh,
here. You're absolutely right seeing
oh,
that. Oh, that
and
hurts. So that was
that was elite, and that means knowing Navy. That elite PU costed him an entire card. Very,
yeah.
very risky. And that bold maneuver straight over their anti-air, very, very unwise. They could open up
That's
with
actually
Shilkas, they could open up with Tors, but they did not open up with anything and still managed to bring it down.
yeah. That's 380 points total. That just went down. There was an SU-27T, I think,
The
the
25,
ground attack.
25T. Yeah,
25T.
yeah.
So one of those was shot down just over Delta, and then the SU 27P AU there was also shot down over Foxtrot. So that's a very, very, very painful loss early in the match. Some very, very valuable and very important assets to lose.
Indeed.
I really like to see Death of Wisconsin has brought forward some resupply, as has Jade, and so they've set up that good defensive line through Echo and Delta.
And now,
They've set up a
and I was just kind of,
really strong artillery
yeah, and
battery, and now they're holding it.
it's interesting because it's kind of looking like a World War One fight almost, where the infantry have dug into the trenches and the artillery is firing overhead.
I will say this is a moment of overextension for me. We'll see how it goes. I won't give too much away, I guess. But and moving some attack
Oh
helicopters
wow!
into a hotel.
So we see a very bold maneuver coming out from Trout here. We see a lot of helicopters coming in, and it seems they understand there's a lot of helicopters coming from them, especially with the K-52 coming in. And there is no combat air patrol for these helicopters. It has to be a bold, decisive kill to take out take this out in hotel, or it's all over.
I will say there is combat air patrol. There's the MiG 29 913S. I tried.
Yep.
A big issue though is they pulled
Yes.
in their Tor and they pulled in the Shilkers there, and that's a pretty strong anti-air net, especially without anti-radar.
Ooh. The Rock Regiment have taken serious damage and have begun routing.
One thing I really look at with helidrops is you don't aim necessarily the helidrop on a location. You aim to helidrop near a location and move forward into it.
Hmm.
And I was impatient and I rushed this, and that's you just don't rush these kind of things. It's something where you build up the assets, you bring them forward when the assets have enough weight to do it.
Oh,
So an attempt, but perhaps not the best attempt.
and that was a good intercept of the 27 PU and a very bold dogfight against the Yak 141, but it had friendly assets on the ground finally able to help it, and that's what brought it down after the merge with the Yak 141.
So in that attack right now, coming forward the other assets that were supposed to be there a bit earlier, and the reason I should have waited, command as well as a bit more infantry there with anti-air. So
Most indeed. Perhaps if there had been more of an infantry buildup, that might have allowed for some more aggressive maneuvers. Perhaps if there were some T-72s from Navy, he might have been able to spare a platoon to come along the round way, the long way around the map. So it looks like we're getting some more action back at Echo. we see some artillery shots coming in from Penquill with the Pram S. We're seeing some of the tree lines getting shelled as a request from Navy Tuna. And looks like Jade is trying to respond to the advancing forces in kind as well. Oh, they're actually firing on the artillery positions. This is where, and it's actually quite wise. Penquill scooped after firing, meaning all the shots that are pouring in on that previous position are now just absolutely missing. And
I will say, this attack that's being attempted right now on Echo, that's a very risky move given the thinness of the line that's being held for the reinforcement line into Bravo.
indeed,
So there's not a lot there. You know, if it goes wrong and your assets wipe, there's not a lot there to prevent a counterattack.
indeed, and it looks like Penquill and Navy Tuna are trying very hard to muster something, but these Gwenolshilki are causing a lot of damage, as well as the T-80s and BMPs that are around that can harass. Maybe perhaps the BMP-1Ds won't last very long because they're pushed way too aggressively forward, but at least if nothing else, they can provide some concern. And it looks like we're seeing some effective counter battery beginning on Navy Tuna's Vassilisk with your Stroke 2 over here in the back line. That Vassilisk has started taking some nifty damage there, halfway down. But I think the real damage is going to come from just hitting the forest where looks like Navy Tuna's Milishruki is trying to take cover in. And, ooh, that Shilka finally gets with a firing into the DHS on my 24P.
I will say, you know, it's a bit of a premature panic. Looking at the point lead, it's definitely it's +2, and you know, for the FRA, we're definitely trying to push assets in at this point and kind of push something up point, see what's there. The issue is just strategic depth, and then you know, what do we have for artillery? What do we have for helicopters? And looking at what's there defensively, I mean, you never know what's there, but they have set up an excellent defensive in depth, and that's a hard line to push.
Yeah, and we're seeing a bit of infantry fight coming over here. We see some VDV and Motoshilki over by just beyond a little bit hotel, where it looks like you're having some infantry skirmishes. Those FJB, as fascinating as they are, unfortunately, the grenade launcher and the BMP-1Ds had something to say about their existence, and they said no. Oof. But it's all right. Back to the main fight over here by Echo. So we're seeing Penquill make some use of the T-55 Dyna 1, but unfortunately it was... No, it was frontal. It was set on the frontal armor, but unfortunately its 13 frontal armor was not sufficient to take 2 hits to the T-80Bs.
Oh, I will say that's a really nice tank use by Wisconsin, putting the T-80Bs forward and the T-80U backwards. So
And,
it's bringing in the assets that are more valuable in behind,
and the
and then
T-80U just ate a side shot from the T-80B, bringing it down to half health. Side shots are very lethal to these super heavy tanks. It is very damning to be pushing tanks that aggressively without flank support. I love the T-80U, but tank by itself is just a tank. Against several companies of tanks, it can be rough. Or yeah, several platoons of tanks, it can be rough. Oh, and we're starting to see Death Wisconsin pull in their own T-80U. This should be interesting because we see that a lot of the flanks that Death Wisconsin has are relatively guarded. But we'll see. There is room for error and maneuvers.
I will say the initial placement of those Gornos in the little villages in between Delta and Echo, those are very, very strong locations, especially because the natural attack is into those points, and that puts them at the flank. So as you try to push in with tanks, you're going to end up with Gornos on the flank, you're going to be pushing into potential assets on the point. And that has been it makes everything you're pushing into kind of a little U. And it's just a strong, strong defensive position. Really nice job with Jade doing those early Gorno placements.
Most indeed.
And a really nice tank use with Death of Wisconsin, and really nice airplay by some guy. It's just it's a very good cohesive team play. Yeah, pulling assets where they're needed and getting them into the fight where they're needed.
Most indeed. And we see Navy pushing in and taking out. Nothing taken out, but the TADU has sustained missile damage. TADUs are pushing aggressively to avoid being hit by artillery. And they are even reversing. Finally, some good play from Navy Turtle. Now this is interesting. The tanks have given potential exposure, but he's feeling quite, what do you say, bold. Unfortunately, he is not being punished for it. Meanwhile, Penquill's M84As are pushing in, and they are cleaning house of those T-55s.
Looking over onto the area to the west of, oh, not west, east, southeast, where my initial push was and towards Hotel. They pretty much repelled that, and they've just put kind of a skeleton force there. They did a couple initial probes to see what was over there. They brought a bit of anti-air forward to counteract that. And very much, my impatience of not pushing as a cohesive unit with my ground infantry support cost me, because I had a couple kills on a Tor and a few other things that came out of Hotel to try to push back the helicopters pushing in. So,
Most indeed. I mean,
and also a really nice placement by some guy of some BDV to counteract those early FJB 40s, trying to kind of capitalize on that woods area.
oh, and we're seeing some guy pull a Su-25T. Looks like they are tired of all these tanks coming in, and they want a response. The M84 eats a missile, bring it down to 3 health from max. Su-27M coming in, knocking out what was an M84A. Going even so far for the evac. But the Su-25 here is here to stay and play. And from the looks of it, there is some Tunguska M's and Stroke 2s, but as long as some guy plays his cool and stays over friendly airspace, it'll be hard for those Tunguska M's and that Stroke 2 to get any shots in. Up, up, here we go. And some guy has gotten greedy, going straight in for the Tunguska and the Stroke 2. And he is absolutely demolished for it, as would be expected. Alright.
Yeah, that's a pretty aggressive play against two Tunguska M's and a Strop 2.
Oh yeah.
That's the kind of thing you pay for, so.
Indeed, indeed. Unfortunately for Penquill, his Dino ones are being shelled by those Nonas. I have to say, those Nonas have been getting their points worth, just harassing and causing a lot of psychological warfare. Their damage capability, while negligible, is certainly nothing compared to the fact that many enemies will consistently keep withdrawing if shelled.
I really like the use of the lighter units by the mod squad. So it's not necessarily the heaviest units out there, the Motostrelki and BRDM-3s,
Mhm.
but it's a consistent line all the way through. There's always something to push into, and there's always a response when you push. And there's something to be said for that volume of assets out there. It's much harder to deal with because it's a real front line with no soft spots.
Mhm. And we see your Salamander trying to do some work here. But unfortunately, the line of sight for the Salamander is cut off as the tank advances.
At this point, their point lead is 500 points to 36, or 532 to 36.
Yeah.
And that is kind of a warning point. It's only +1 or +2. It's been most of the match, but after 30 minutes of that, it definitely makes a difference, and it means that the impetus is on us at this point to actually make an offensive.
And Conquest,
And
there's a phrase that's saying that 33% lead is 50% win.
And for this match, I think we'll see what happens, but that might be absolutely true. So
Looks like your VDV, those VDV from some guy are being properly suppressed with a combination of FJB40 and MI24D. Just over by Charlie.
just wishing that walk regiment would get in there a little bit more quickly, as they would certainly do a better job of dealing with that. Okay.
For sure. But they have no problem taking on the BMD2s. And unfortunately for the BMD2s, they are out of fuel, so they cannot see for much. But the Rock Regiment constantly being able to fire one RPG every 3 seconds finally eliminates all 3 of those. The platoon of BMDs are wiped.
And I think there's about to be some payback for that. There's an IL-102 coming into that area, so I think we may see a very nasty hit coming in here. It'll be very interesting to see how this lands.
We see an IL-102, oof, and that takes out what I believe was an MI-24D. That's a
Of all
retaliation.
hits, it's retaliation, not the most painful retaliation,
Ooh,
but definitely
and we also
retaliation.
see one of Navy Tuna's Tunguska M's getting, both of them have been killed by bombers. That was effective suppression and good airplay from some guy if I ever saw it. Now,
I have
there is only Pencrol Sava acting as air defense in Charlie and Gulf. The Tunguskas were annihilated.
I have to say that some guy had absolutely excellent airplay, very good knowledge of kind of where the air defenses were, and very good in and out hits against assets. Just really good airplay, really good air control, and combined with that really strong, you wouldn't think it, just Shilka's everywhere, but it's a strong anti-air net that does a good job of keeping. Um,
For sure. And as I was saying earlier, the Shilka can be a solid asset as long as it remains not spotted. So typically, tree lines are a good place of cover for it.
Kind of looking on the map, it looks like those Shilkas have taken quite a bit of damage. There are a lot coming in though, and that's a huge advantage of having kind of a unit that you can just put out some bulk with. You take a few losses and pull some more.
Indeed.
And there's 3 more coming in, and that will keep that anti-air net up over Delta and Echo, and yeah,
In-
we'll see how it progresses.
Indeed. And I do believe these Shilkas do come in as a 13 per card. So even if you lose 5 of them, you're still going to have more than 50% of your forces for Shilkas.
Got an attack going on into Echo now, definitely kind of into the desperation zone. So we've got a combination of tanks, some helicopters, and some infantry moving forward.
Yep.
One thing we don't see, and one thing that I'm sure you will criticize, is we don't see smoke. And in a case where there's so many Gornos out there, and there's so much in the woods, I think that would probably be not a bad choice.
Indeed, if you could, if there was a way to effectively suppress a lot of these positions and close the distance with smoke, that might have forced a lot of those tanks out there to stop engaging and fall back.
I will say, in terms of a hardened position as well, there are 4 T-80Us in the woods there. And that, mixed in with the Gornos, mixed in with everything else that's in there, any tank asset pushing up against that is very much risking side shots, very much risking pushing into a very exposed position.
And it looks like we're seeing you, Trout, pull some Dino 1s, trying to engage some of these T-80Us, which one of them has a, fire computer reset and exploded. That belonged to Death of Wisconsin. Really aggressive play there, especially against a triple stack of T-80Us. Even though these beasts are wounded, they are still a beast. Penquill trying to move on the advance, but his Dino 1s have such a very bad stabilizer that it is difficult to hit for anything for much. At less than, while panicked, having less than 50% accuracy while using the stabilizer, very tough to get your shots in. And it looks like Navy Tuna's armor push has come to a halt as he withdraws from the area with no results. Echo has not been seized, Delta has not been pushed, and the enemy is still able to continue reinforcing and shell the tanks that are trying to advance.
I will say, really nice flexible defense there as assets were lost. There's another line behind them, and the valuable assets are pulled back. They're saved, they're repaired, and they can re-engage. So really nice play on behalf of the mod squad.
Indeed.
And a very nice way of dealing with a mixed arms attack. It's kind of what you have to have against a mixed arms attack is a little bit of everything, and yeah, they had it.
Indeed. Ooh, and a Dino 1 has just gotten the slap, bringing it down to 1 health. Impressive. Perhaps it hit the frontal armor of its 13 frontal armor value from the missile. Ooh, and we see some T-25 AM2s being fired at the Dinos. Intriguing. And some guy getting greedy, and the second 25T is down. Some guys' 25Ts are out of the fight. That goes the entire card. Down for 1, all out for 2.
That being said, there are 2 MiG-25 RBTs coming in now, so there are some alternative assets coming in to fill that role, and we'll see how they do.
Ooh, and we are seeing cluster bombs coming in. Missing missing your stroke 2 and missing the other points as well. Really tough time. Really tough time for some guy. He was close. Very close to knocking out some of your stroke 2s or otherwise, but by the good graces, he missed. Oh, we're seeing some flares down towards Hotel. Looks like some guy is indicating a request for an attack.
All right, and it looks like we are also seeing some movement towards Gulf. So I think that the FRA, my team, is going to probably do an attack on Gulf next. I'm interested to see if this is coordinated, and I'm interested to see if there is proper artillery support for this attack, potentially some smoke. We'll see.
Most indeed.
I would say this attack has gone a bit early, with Penquill's Dynas attacking the T-80Bs a bit before the rest of the assets are forward. So a little bit of a dangerous attack. We'll see how it plays out.
There we go. And Salamander knocks out a T-80B.
A little bit aggressive with the Salamanders, so I mean I pay for that. A very nice job with Shilkas there.
And Penquill's BMP1s or BVP1Ps managed to use the Grum to knock out a Shilka. That instantly makes up for their point value, because these are little 20 pointers. Double stack coming in at 40 points. Not bad.
Speaking of combined arms, they're going up against some Gornos and some
Oh, we got some bombers coming in. It looks like some guy has had enough of these tank rushes. He is oh! The entire attack is absolutely demolished. Oof!
Excellent play by some guy. Throughout this match, some guy was a very good air player, and right where it's needed to stabilize the front. Those bombs land, and they stop that attack dead, and that is exactly what was needed.
And here we go. The defense is thin, but the cavalry is coming. The Mi-24Ds are on the way. Meanwhile, looks like Death Wisconsin saying a T-80B might be alone, but one tank is better than no tank. That poor walk regiment over there. I feel sorry for it. It's over by a hotel.
there is another attack going on over on Echo, so there's definitely some desperation setting in. This is a light TADU and some Motorstructure pushing forward, seeing if there's kind of a soft spot, and it really there isn't. So
And it looks like Jade's trying to make an infantry push. I'm surprised there isn't a... There could be an artillery response to these attacks, because we are seeing a lot of infantry starting to push towards Bravo. But the
one
prime
thing
S's
I
are
will note
silent. Go, sorry, go ahead.
is the Pram S's are in fairly low density and they're fairly spread across the map, and so that definitely makes it difficult to get a good volume of fire out.
Indeed.
We've got one Pram S on Bravo, we've got one Pram S over on uh, kind of our en route into Bravo. So, I mean, they'll be able to fire back, but enough to really do a lot of damage. Yeah, we'll see.
And Trout, it looks like you've come over to Gulf, and some guy is having a response for your helicopters, and wants to try to deal with the MiG 29 as well. MiG 29 RBT is dropping its bomb load. Will it be enough? And it misses! But still dealing quite a bit of damage to the Sava, even though missing.
And I will say, I mean, the whole point of this at this point, like desperation, they're at 700 points pretty much, and so we do have a command. We have stopped the bleed, but
And despite the successful bombing from some guy, the reinforcements and the cavalry was a little too late. Could be argued the Sava, could be argued the uh, East German helicopters being present in the field with their air missiles could be raising concerns about every Mi-24 in the field. Oh. Mm.
I'm really interested on the backside of Charlie. We have a little bit of Motorstrelki in there. You know, not the strongest unit, but they're there, and there's nothing to defend against them. So that force that at a certain point was kind of the FRA's little playground is now definitely solidly the Mod Squad's playground, and we'll see what happens there.
And we see that some guy has surrendered. So now it is Death of Wisconsin and Jade against Trout and Navy Tuna, as Penquill and some guy, or People's Republic of some guy, as he would refer to himself here, are now surrendering out to provide more units to their team.
I'm always happy, you know, even if I'm going to lose a match. I won't say I'm going to lose a match, but you know, if that happens, to see the air player surrender means that you've got a decent air defense and that it's been a very hard pushed match.
Most indeed.
Um,
But
it's always a good time when the air player surrenders.
sometimes the air player surrenders just because they've run out of points to spend units on, especially when you're playing thin and with planes.
Absolutely, that's very, very true.
Oh, and we see some guys, old K-52, doing work. I believe it might have fallen under the control of Death of Wisconsin, and the Igla missiles were able to down two of your Mi-24s that were close stacked together. It is discipline to remember to split your helicopters, but it saves some of their lives. The artillery seems to be pouring in from across the map, over by Foxtrot into Gulf. And we got a confirmed construction of what I believe is a Sava. That means there is no more air defense between Charlie and Gulf. Meanwhile,
I will
looks
point out we have an attack going on Charlie to
yep, it looks like
steal
the
the
Motor
command.
Strelke going in for the BMP 1K, and unfortunately the BMP 1K is detract. That is a sitting duck. The the BMP 1? Yeah, the BMP 1 got struck out by the Salamandra. We should.
Unfortunately, the Salamander is definitely not a hard counter to those Motostrelki, so we'll see how this goes.
And it is out! Despite Navy Tuna's seizure of Gulf, the loss of Charlie now gives Mod Squad the +1 to continue out for the next, what could be 20 minutes if they don't mount an effective counterattack into Charlie.
I will say they built up really good resources on the edge of Gulf. So although they lost it, they're not recklessly trying to push back in.
Oh,
Um, Mod Squad is just doing a really nice build up, getting all the assets they need, getting a Tor up there for anti-air, and they're getting prepared to take Gulf back. We'll see what happens.
And we see Navy Tuna has brought out his PU and 25T. It looks like at this point in the match, his other PU has either has gotten to elite, or it has or it was a card up his sleeve that he had for an elite PU. Either way, we
We
shall
are
see.
seeing a large coordinated attack going off on Echo. FRA attacking into Echo. And I think this is probably, this is the last chance. There's not going to be a hell of a lot of time, and there's not going to be a heck of a lot of assets after this. So we'll see how this attack goes through. Not a lot of smoke, a nice mix of assets, perhaps not enough helicopters, and perhaps not enough air. But at this point, there isn't much left. So
It looks like a T-80U was destroyed by a Su-25T with a side shot.
I think we're looking at some very, very dangerous placement for these T-80Us right now. There's 3 T-80Us on the side, there's Cornus trophies on the side.
Ooh.
We'll see if they get out alive.
These T-80Us are concerned for their livelihoods, as Death Wisconsin is bringing T-80Us over the hill as well. These heavy blows are costing points for everyone involved. But Jade is coming in with the cavalry of rockets, panicking everything in sight. Amazing place. And looks like Death Wisconsin has the last T-80U standing. And that looks rough for Navy. However, looks like he has a second platoon. That is an Echo. Currently being engaged, T-55s and some Gorno Strelki. T-55 is out, but the T-80Us are heavily damaged. 17 minutes left on the clock. Is there time to repair?
Just looking at this what's left kind of on the FRA side, there isn't a lot there. There's some transports, there's a bit of infantry, a few tanks, and definitely time to regroup. Make sure that you have a defensive line available, and unfortunately, when you're behind on the clock, that's not a good position to be in. So
Most indeed. Hmm. Oh, Trout. Looks like we have a Stroke 2 and a Scott R3 over here, and it's away from hotel, but unfortunately, them hanging out together isn't going to be enough to get anywhere, it seems. Well, maybe they're having a smoke, eh?
I think they've been having a smoke for most of the match. So it's the remnants of my very first attempt to take hotel, and just a kind of reminder throughout the match.
All right.
Make sure your stuff is coordinated.
And we are sailing our artillery barrage into the corner of Echo, where a lot of your forces are placed. The volume of fire is crippling for your
That
forces.
is an absolute ton of nanas, and those nanas are really, at this point, whatever they shoot at, there's going to be punishment. It's a difficult thing to go against. Is just that volume of fire as a defensive artillery.
And now we see
We see
two platoons of T-80Bs trying to push down the hill for a counterattack in order to intimidate all of Navy Tuna's tanks over here. And maybe, oh, we got 5 missiles going in for the T-80U. A lot of them whiz around.
It is nice to see the mod squad did a very good job seizing the early initiative, and at this point they're doing the counterattack. It is actually +1 for the FRA at this point, and it's nice to see them having to push forward and see how it goes.
Looks like the T-80Bs are trying their best to push as hard as they can. But the T-80Us are now the bigger bully. Those Bs are solid tanks, but without spearhead support from T-80Us, it might be a hard counter to win against that much heavy armor, as we're watching platoons get completely decimated.
Looking at those T-80Us here, there isn't a lot of support outside of just the tanks. So there isn't helicopters, there isn't artillery support. And that's a very, very hard thing to go up against. You're pushing into something, and you're pushing into, especially ATGMs. It's going to be a hard fight. So
The Tor from Death, Wisconsin, trying to intimidate Navy Tuna's Su-25T is effective. It hits it on the side and sends it home, is sending it back with 3 HP. Will it continue to? Nope. It is evacuing. It seems the.
I will point out,
What?
I will point out on Golf, there's been a very successful counterattack. The mod squad has retaken most of Golf, and I'm wondering if they don't have commands left, as they have not moved a command into Golf, but they have essentially fully captured it.
Indeed. And it seems a sad time for Navy Tuna, pushing his Motoshoki across out in the open field with no smoke support, getting crippled by and mauled by the grenade launcher in the BMP-1D. Sad day indeed. And we got the
Good note for coordination. At this point, it's just desperation. But there's Dyna's trying to move up into Echo, and without support, I'm afraid those will be absolutely slaughtered.
indeed. And it looks like the Tor has expended all of its missiles trying to hit one of your Mi-24Ds. One of the missiles did hit, but it lost line of sight a couple times. But fortunately for them, they have plenty of anti-air guns with plenty of ammo in stock, in case you decide to fly over the tree line. And Jade has surrendered.
This is not a surrender, this is a disconnect. So
Oh,
we did have some connection issues during this match,
indeed.
and this is the final disconnect of Jade during this match.
Oh,
Yeah,
well, fortunately for them, it has been quite successful, regardless. While Death Wisconsin has a lot on her plate, it will certainly be uh, not impossible to win the fight for the next 13 minutes if they can sustain the successes. But with the improved amount of tanks they've just received, I don't expect anything less.
one of the big bonuses is command. So at this point, they will receive more commands, and they can get more commands out on the field because of that disconnect. And you can see a command coming right into Golf. Smart to do. Get it in there and just get that pointed up a little bit higher so the game goes a little bit faster.
Indeed. The Stroke 2 is killed by the Shilka. The Shilka that has just been dutifully standing guard. And unfortunately for herself and the Scott R3, the K-52 has decided that the shark is hungry. But,
I'm afraid that's a pretty easy feast, so.
oh yeah. It may not have much, but against an opponent who has no armor and no weapons, it's an easy feast. Navy Tuna, again, trying to mount another assault, making it much further than last time.
Definitely over on Echo, a little bit more depth of assets. There's a couple salamanders there for eyes. Recon is very important for butting ATGMs. Some supply, empty now, but it's there, and also a bit of anti-air with the helicopter. So a bit more of a well-rounded defense from FRA, but still, at this point, there just aren't the assets left to really mount a fully incorporated sort of attack onto a point.
Alright. Navy Tuna is finally able to push up onto the plateau. But with less than 10 minutes left on the clock, anything less than a complete domination will be rough. But still, perhaps there's a good fight to be had yet.
I will say, pushing into I hadn't really thought of it, but pushing into someone's reinforcement lane, where they can get extra reinforcements very, very quickly, is dangerous. If you have the speed and you have the assets, it's not a bad idea. But in this case, those T-80Bs can get pulled in very quickly and can counter any effective attack.
Indeed. It's always better to attack the point of the spawn-in than try to go for the reinforcement lane. If you're able to get there first and dig in like a lot of RPGs and effectively make them pay for calling any more units, that becomes increasingly cost ineffective at the moment, it might be worth it. But beyond that, going for a spawn camp is usually very untactical.
I'll point out the layer defense on Delta is still there. That defense has stayed throughout the match. The layer defense on Echo has been about pushed back by about half, but it's still there. And
And,
so I have to very much note that's a very strong strategy for
and Death Wisconsin's
being.
tours are doing work. I have to admit, these tours have been doing work throughout the fight. I'm sorry to cut you off, by the way. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, don't apologize. Yeah, those Tors in combination with the Shilkas. The Shilkas are a very strong gun asset. The Tors are a very strong missile asset. And it was a very good combination, very, very difficult to deal with throughout the fight. You're absolutely correct in saying they've done
Yeah,
work.
and yeah, the tours have just been able to take on the helicopters. They've been able to take on all the planes that were up in the air, and as long as they stay fed, the missiles keep flying.
At this point in the match, I believe I'm down to 2 recon helicopters. Looking over the map very carefully, but I mean, a lot of that's Shilkas and a lot of that's Tors, and just a very good, strong asset with a very strong range.
Oh wow, and we are
Really,
seeing a very bold maneuver by Jade, pushing BTR 90s into Bravo. Look at that. Those units
I
are
will say
panicked. Go ahead.
that is not a Jade maneuver. That is Jade's units. That is a Death to
Oh
Wisconsin
yes,
maneuver.
that's right. That is right. Thank you for the correction. That was Wisconsin
Um,
sending in very bold maneuvers just to test the defenses, and found there was nothing this time.
and having played quite a bit with Death to Wisconsin, that is exactly what I would expect, and I'm happy to see. Oh, big surrender. I surrender. Oh,
Oh,
the
you
shame on me.
surrender. Oh, and the IL-102 being attacked by Navy tuna. Oh, the missiles are off, and the IL-102 is downed. But the
And
PU
so
is
is the
it just
PU.
ate the Shulka. Ooh, that hurts. Down by a 35 pointer for crossing the airspace. That's
I will say,
that's embarrassing.
go ahead. There's something to be said for having set up that early defensive line, and what's to be said for it is when the end of the match comes and you need time to micro, you don't have to worry about Delta. There's stuff already there. You don't have to worry about Gulf. And that is a very, very, very strong position from the Mod Squad.
Most indeed. I believe we've been noticing in these fights, even from the last tournament, that those who seize the first points are most difficult to be removed from it.
I think the offensive is definitely it requires a lot more coordination, a lot more planning. Once you have the initiative, there's some advantage if there's a hole in the line. But if there's not, and you've got to break a line, the defensive is a very, very strong place to be.
And, indeed. And I've seen a lot of planes come in from Navy tuna. Looks like every surrender seems to be bringing back the Su-25Ts. So this is a very interesting kind of strategy that uh, the planes keep coming back in for every surrender, but costing more micromanagement on the one player that remains. Navy Tuna looks like he's trying to cover himself with a Basilisk, and perhaps it saved his life.
Very unfortunate for those TADUs. They have an optical failure and they have a weapon jam, so
Oh yeah,
they are
that is a tough.
not precisely in the best spot right now.
Yeah, there is something to be said for the TADU being used as spearhead tank, but uh, given its low quantity, it's typically better used as a Overwatch tank, using its very long range and powerful gun to cover the advance of cheaper tanks that can absorb more hits. Well, that may not be able to absorb more hits, but the losses are acceptable, or at least able to be more easily absorbed than the TADUs. But the Navy has pushed in T-80As to counter the tanks that are climbing up over the hill. Death of Wisconsin pushing rough and reckless just to keep you all at bay for the next 5 minutes at this point. And it's going to work.
I have to say, it's not going to be 5 minutes. We're at 981 points with a +2 lead. You can see there's nothing left. This is an attrition fight, and there's a huge amount on the Mod Squad side. There's nothing left on the FRI side, so
Indeed.
that's a match, and that's well fought, well defended, and a good use of assets.
Most indeed.
not the most exciting fight. I like to see those wild fights where a lot of things happen and there's a lot of movement. But for an attritional fight, I think this was a very good instructive attritional fight about making sure that you have force concentration and making sure that you have communication with your team.
Indeed. And that is game. So let's see. That brings us to the MVPs. Navy, despite having a small force of tanks, not a whole lot of people, or a lot of tanks back, was able to get quite a few kills. Penquill, as a rookie, sustaining natural losses. And Trout, looks like you certainly bit the bullet a bit.
Thanks, I appreciate that. Um, I would say very strongly the initial opening by Jade on the mod squad is a extraordinarily strong opening. And really, really made the difference. But it's hard to say because the Moss squad had very tight play. Without the air assets, without the excellent airplay, without the bombing,
Yeah,
some of those big bombing runs,
yeah.
it might have been maybe not a hugely different match, but a different match. It might have gone to the full hour. Um, and then Death to Wisconsin really took the match to the end and had some very, very strong tank plays that did some very good counter pushes to armor. And so overall, to say there's an MVP on the mod squad, I would have a hard time really placing that.
Indeed. Like some guy made some solid plays. Death of Wisconsin made some very good plays. Overall, I'd say for Mod Squad, the team spread for the share was relatively even given the tasks involved. Um, Perhaps Jade taking a little bit more losses than otherwise, but nonetheless was able to help secure the victory and was able to seize a lot of conquest points for the team. So it's hard to say that that there's any one particular MVP for Mod Squad. Um, I'll have to say, despite Navy making some questionable plays, played out pretty hard as much as I believe he could in this particular fight. Uh,
I would absolutely agree. I think Navy did a very good job trying to hold with the assets that they had, and that's it's what you have to do sometimes. It's a hard position to be on the offense,
eh,
and you do the best you can with what you've got.
oh, for sure, for sure. Ah, and yeah, very interesting play that you capture all that terrain. Um, but as you said, uh, not waiting for those reinforcements, being in a haste, uh, as there is reckless haste that can be wise, but at the same time, uh, as you might say, uh, being reckless can have its own consequences.
On a map like this, especially where there's a very short distance between the reinforcement lane and the actual reinforcement point,
Mhm.
it means you've got to get on that point and you've got to capture it quick.
And there is a lot of hedgerows. We do have to admit,
Yeah,
like there can be anti-air coming around every tree line or every little hill or something like that. It's uh, it's definitely one of those things that you want to be cautious and you want to err on the side of caution. But if you don't be bold, you won't seize enough territory in time. And the easiest point to be bold is the beginning, when both teams know that whoever seizes the points first is going to have the advantage when it comes to contesting the fight there.
and I will criticize myself absolutely here. Is my concern was a wide flank, a wide helicopter flank, and so I moved to deal with that before it was an issue, and that definitely allowed Jade to get in onto Echo and Delta,
Hmm.
and that was more decisive, having the points, than a flank. And my disorganized attack off the flank did not change that. So it's yeah, when there's an important objective to seize, sometimes it's just better to focus on the objective.
Indeed. But I do appreciate your initiative to open up new fronts, though. Um, had there had been more, how do you say, entrenchment on that side of the map, forcing them to split their focus on two fronts might have helped out in the long run. Had there been more seizure of the territory at first. But I understand the feel that you want to quickly cut the head off the snake before they have a chance to spawn in more units, though. I completely understand that. I do.
I think a better move and probably a more difficult, but for the game, a more decisive move would have been setting up a very strong anti-air net. I didn't really have the assets for that though. But that is their primary air in corridor. So if I had had some long-range radar assets, that would have made it very, very difficult for them to pull in high-value air assets, and it would have made a very much bigger difference. And so having the patience to sort of glob up the units there and then get those anti-air assets in and then have them defend it would have been a lot more decisive than an early attack. But it's knowing what units you have and what they can do, and you know sometimes you make the wrong choice.
For sure, for sure. I think for like a kind of operation like that, you would need like a wheeled heavy anti-air with some trucks, maybe even some helicopters. That way, if things get a little too hot, you can try to make your way out of there as fast as you can. Well, that anything else you'd like to add, Trout?
Well, my shame is eternal, but I will return for vengeance for sure.
All right.
Very good match. Excellent, excellent play and excellent teamwork from the mod squad. I congratulate them on their victory. It was extremely well deserved. So
For sure, and good play from your team. I definitely enjoyed seeing a lot of the aggressive tank pushes, and for sure, I think there'll be some finer tune points to make, but there'll be some time to practice. All right,
these fish will swim again.
these fish will swim again. All right. Well, thank you for watching, everybody, and we wish you a good night.